Hey everyone, I'm Yasmin, and today I want to tell you a story that's been sitting heavy on my heart for a long time. It's about my mother-in-law, Jessica. Oh, where do I even begin? She's a piece of work, to put it mildly. My husband, Key, actually encouraged me to share this story because, well, he finds these kinds of wild family tales both ridiculous and oddly therapeutic to read. And trust me, he's had a front row seat to his mother's chaos his entire life. She's been causing drama since the day he was born. Let me take you back to where it all started. Key grew up with Jessica, who, at first, was married to his dad, but that didn't last long. His father couldn't handle her volatile temper and erratic ways, so he left not long after Key was born. Jessica, however, didn't learn from that heartbreak. Soon after, she got involved with another man, who turned out to be just as unreliable. He eventually walked out too, leaving Key's father stuck paying child support until he decided he'd had enough and cut ties completely. I've never met either of her exes, and honestly, I have no desire to. Jessica often loves to paint herself as the selfless single mother who raised her son all by herself, but that's far from the truth. She didn't raise him out of love. She raised him like an ATM. She milked her ex's family for money for years, and when that well ran dry, she begrudgingly took a job but still guilt-tripped Key's dad whenever she needed extra cash. And when Key was old enough to start earning, she pocketed every bit of his paycheck, claiming it was to help with the bills. By the time he turned 18, Key knew he had to escape. He took out student loans, earned a scholarship, and moved away for college. And that's where I met him. From the moment we started dating, he'd tell me story after story about the emotional chaos he'd grown up in, how his mother controlled every aspect of his life, made him feel guilty for wanting independence, and always twisted things to make herself the victim. It was heartbreaking and infuriating. I remember asking him one night, "If she's caused you so much pain, why do you still talk to her?" His answer was always the same. He said he felt obligated, that she was his mother after all. That's the grip of manipulation she had on him. I gently encouraged him to seek therapy, to start healing and set boundaries. At first he resisted, but eventually he agreed. I even paid for his sessions out of my own savings, because I could see how much he needed it. Those early months were rough. Jessica called constantly, whining about how distant her son had become, accusing me of turning him against her. She played the victim perfectly, but the truth was, Key was finally finding his voice. Therapy worked wonders for him. Slowly, he started pushing back. He stopped sending her money every time she asked. He learned to say no, and that was when Jessica's hatred toward me really started to show. According to her, I was poisoning her son's mind. She told Key that I was manipulating him, that I wanted to destroy their relationship, but he stood his ground, and that was the first time I saw him truly free from her grasp. I'll never forget that moment. Fast forward a few years. Key and I graduated, got married, and finally started building the life we'd always dreamed of. We both landed good jobs and decided to save up for a house. We kept our wedding simple, a cozy backyard ceremony at my parents' home. It wasn't lavish, but it was perfect. We were proud that we'd done everything ourselves, with no handouts from anyone. Meanwhile, Jessica's life was spiraling. She had remarried a man named Frank, lazy, loud, and completely jobless. The two of them made quite the pair. Since neither could manage money, Jessica kept calling Key for help. Out of guilt, he paid for their apartment rent for a while. We thought that might give us some peace, but of course, it didn't. When Jessica found out we'd finally bought a house, she suddenly turned overly sweet, showering us with fake congratulations, only to follow up with a bombshell. She and Frank were moving in with us. I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" She said it like it was already decided. "We've been struggling with rent, and you've got a big house now. It just makes sense." I couldn't believe the nerve. "Jessica, we bought this house together. Both of us. You can't just invite yourself to live here. Her face hardened. Watch your tone, Yasmin. I won't be disrespected in this family. I held my ground. Respect goes both ways. And this is our home. You and Frank will not be moving in. She turned to Key like a lawyer addressing a jury. You owe me, son. I raised you on my own. It's your duty to take care of me now. But Key didn't flinch. Mom, you're already being taken care of. I pay your rent. You're not moving in, and that's final. Her jaw dropped, but Key didn't back down. You're not getting a key to our house either. End of discussion. I thought that would finally shut things down. But no. The next few days were pure chaos. Jessica and Frank called nonstop, leaving long, guilt-ridden voicemails. Jessica accused me again of brainwashing her baby. At first, it was almost funny how dramatic she was, but soon it became unbearable. Finally, Key went over to their apartment to talk to them face to face. He laid it all out clearly. They would not be moving in, and if they didn't stop harassing us, he'd cut contact. For a while, it seemed like the message had gotten through. The calls stopped, and the silence was blissful. A month later, we finally took our long-awaited vacation, a quiet beach getaway we'd been saving for. The first few days were heaven. We lounged by the ocean, laughed over dinner, and left all our worries behind. Until one evening, my phone buzzed with a notification from our Ring security system. Motion detected. Front door. Curious, I opened the live feed, and my stomach dropped. There, on our screen, was Jessica and Frank, moving into our house. They had bags, suitcases, even grocery sacks. Jessica was in the kitchen, unpacking like she owned the place. I couldn't breathe. Key, I said, my voice shaking. You need to see this. He looked at the screen, his expression turning from confusion to fury. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. Leave it to my mother to break into our house while we're on vacation. We had made it clear. They weren't welcome to live with us. Yet here they were, invading our space like it was theirs. The question that haunted me most was how they even got in. The only explanation was that Frank, ever the schemer, must have secretly copied our house keys during one of his visits. It was beyond disturbing. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was illegal. And for the first time, I felt genuinely unsafe. Key, I said carefully. We might need to call the police. He was quiet for a moment, staring at the footage. Then, his face hardened. You're right. Enough is enough. I asked softly, Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. He nodded. They've crossed every line possible. There have to be consequences. It's time to cut them off for good. So that's where we were, standing at a crossroads between family and peace, between guilt and self-respect. And as Key tried calling his mother one last time to give her a chance to leave peacefully, the camera feed showed them sitting, there in our living room, whispering to each other, completely unaware that this time they'd gone too far. Through the security cameras, we could see her and Frank in a huddle, likely discussing our call. When she finally answered, we put it on speaker, so Frank could hear too. Hey, Kay, how's the vacation? She asked feigning ignorance, but I wasn't having it breaking. Into our house isn't something to brush off. Jessica interjected. There was a tense silence on her end, and she exchanged a glance with Frank, who seemed adept at deception and manipulation. It was evident that Jessica had anticipated this confrontation likely, expecting her husband Frank to come up with some sort of defense. She immediately accused me of being crazy and demanded Key to silence me, but Key wouldn't stand for it. Don't talk to my wife like that, he asserted. Jessica's tone turned accusatory, claiming we were spying on them with cameras. Both inside and outside the house, she seemed offended by our intrusion into their privacy, which struck me as ironic, given her own invasion of ours. Unsure if she was deflecting or genuinely offended, he couldn't help but retort. "That's rich coming from you, Jessica. You broke into our home against our wishes." But Jessica remained defiant, insisting that as Key's mother, she had a right to be there. Key, however, stood his ground, reminding her of the apartment he already provided for her. Their presence in our home was unwelcome, and we demanded answers about how they obtained the keys. Frank's admission confirmed our suspicions. "I made a copy of your keys," he confessed, brazenly enraged. Key rebuked him, but Frank asserted his authority as Key's stepfather. The tension escalated as Key challenged Frank's actions, labeling them as forgery and illegal. Jessica attempted to justify Frank's actions, claiming a mother should have access to her son's home for emergencies, but her flimsy excuse didn't hold water. We gave them an ultimatum: leave within the hour, or we'd involve the authorities. Their panic was palpable as they huddled together. Whispering frantically through the cameras, we could see their fear-stricken faces, realizing the consequences of their actions in their final attempt to assert control. Frank and Jessica disregarded our ultimatum and refused to leave. They dismissed my warnings, claiming the house belonged solely to Key and that I had no authority but Westwood, firm reminding them that it was our home too, and we wanted them out. Before involving the police as the hour passed, we observed them through the surveillance cameras, seeing Jessica unpacking her bags. Defiantly, anger boiled within us, but we refused to engage further, recognizing that reasoning with their entitled mindset was futile when we called the police. They arrived promptly, and we watched as they confronted Jessica and Frank at our doorstep. The officers explained the situation, and Jessica and Frank attempted to feign confusion. But when confronted with the evidence, they changed their tune, pleading with Key to let them stay. But Key remained resolute, refusing to cave into their manipulation. Despite their pleas and excuses, he demanded they'd leave immediately. However, Jessica's revelation left us dumbfounded. She had canceled their lease and sold their furniture, expecting us to house them. Key's anger reached its peak upon hearing this betrayal. He refused to entertain her excuses, insisting they vacate his house. Despite Jessica's desperate pleas, Kay stood firm, unwilling to compromise his boundaries. But Jessica continued to plead, appealing to Key's sense of familial duty. "Do you want your mother to be homeless? Mom, since you've made yourself homeless by canceling your lease, I won't be giving you any more rent money. I'm done," Key declared firmly, unmoved by Jessica's tears and pleas. Despite her attempts to guilt-trip us, West stood our ground, refusing to entertain her manipulative tactics. Both Key and I were furious at their audacity and crossed boundaries. We shouted at them and ended the call, immediately blocking their numbers. The cops ensured that Jessica and Frank left our house, and we arranged for a trusted friend to house us until our return. We also had the locks changed for added security. Frank and Jessica's departure marked the beginning of their downward spiral. They tried to garner support from relatives, but no one sided with them. Knowing Jessica's history of drama, they attempted to harass us with new phone numbers, but failed to gain any traction. During our vacation, we kept our phones off, only checking for emergencies once a day. Despite their persistent attempts to intrude, our friends successfully thwarted their efforts by threatening to involve the authorities. Upon our return, we learned that Frank had left Jessica because she could no longer house and support him for free. Desperate, Jessica begged Key for help, finally realizing the consequences of her actions. However, Key remained steadfast in his decision to maintain no contact. Recently heard from family that Jessica now lives in a trailer and works at a retail store with retirement nowhere in sight. It's a stark